Listen, you piece of trash, do you know where you are? You are in a concentration camp. Here we have our own methods, and you'll have the opportunity to try them. There is no loitering here, and no one escapes. The sentinels are instructed to shoot anyone who tries to break out without warning, and we have the elite of the SS. Our men are great shooters. With these words, Hermann Baranowski, the commander of the Dachau concentration camp, received the prisoners who arrived at the place that would become the greatest nightmare of their lives. Then, in this camp as in the rest, the victims were harassed with innumerable punishments and macabre practices. Punishments ranged from forcing captives to stand for long hours, and under extreme temperatures, to immersing children in barrels of water. So, what horrific experiences were the prisoners of Nazi Germany subjected to? Don't leave your screen, because in the next few minutes we'll tell you everything about the brutal punishments inflicted on the captives of the concentration camps. Are you ready? Let's start. The arrival of Adolf Hitler to power on January 30, 1933 meant a before and after in the life of the population of Germany and the surrounding countries. A few weeks after the beginning of his mandate, the attacks began on the inhabitants that both he and his party saw as an inferior race. That same year the first concentration camp, known as Dachau, was created, which gave way to the creation of more than 1,000 similar spaces, such as Auschwitz-Birkenau, Bergen-Belsen, and Mauthausen-Gusen. In an interview, Nikolaus Wachsmann, professor of European history in London and author of the book K.L. History of the Nazi concentration camps, referred to the function of these places. They had different purposes. They were especially part of the state terror network that included the courts, the police, the prisons, or the ghettos. The concentration camp had to eradicate those identified as social, racial, and political enemies to create a homogeneous and healthy national community. This function progressively took different forms, constantly evolving and overlapping, such as forced labor, selective assassination, human experiments, and mass extermination. It should be noted that, although most of the prisoners were Jewish, there were also gypsies, criminals, Jehovah's Witnesses, and homosexuals, among others. Once locked up there, they became captives and could not get out. Upon entering, they had to hand over their clothes and personal belongings. Immediately afterwards, an officer shaved their hair and gave them the infamous striped uniform, along with a pair of wooden clogs. Once the access to the concentration camp ended, a life of authentic suffering began. Although each concentration camp had its methods and peculiarities, there was a series of mechanisms that related them. All captives had to wake up early, make their beds, and after undergoing initial training, they had to do forced labor. Generally, these consisted of tasks within agricultural farms, factories, industrial establishments, such as road repair or forest felling, among others. One of the most popular factories where forced labor was used was the Todt organization, dedicated to civil and military engineering. There, Soviet prisoners of war worked for free during months or years. After long hours of work, concentration camp prisoners received the only daily portion of food, which usually consisted of a meager vegetable soup with a small piece of bread. One of the moments most feared by the prisoners was the formations that they had to carry out both at dawn and in the afternoon. After the forced labor, they had to remain standing for many hours in extreme temperatures, while the officers controlled the presence of all the captives. The case of Louis Subrig is well known, who in 1939 managed to escape from the Dachau camp. After his absence was discovered, in retaliation, all of his companions had to stand in formation for an entire night, and had to endure freezing cold. In turn, the SS troops used the formations to check who was physically fit to work, and those who did not meet the necessary conditions were executed. There are plenty of chilling stories of the victims who came face to face with harsh punishments by their captors. Among them, we find that of the British prisoner Johanna Hill, who, due to the beatings received by the Gestapo, lost her chance of conceiving. Ludmila Kokrda, also born in Britain, was forced to work cleaning swamps in heavy rains. It should be noted that, to carry out this work, she only wore a cotton shirt, and her diet was based on beets, leaves, and potato peels. Other punishments to which the prisoners were exposed were medical experiments. The most popular executor of these tortures was Joseph Mengele, known as the Angel of Death of Auschwitz. Mengele exposed the victims to terrible experiences that no human being could tolerate. Some of his practices consisted of injecting liquid cement into the wounds of women, or subjecting several individuals to boiling water baths to assess the maximum temperature they could tolerate, among other sinister procedures. According to Annette Cabelli, a survivor of the Auschwitz camp, the young girls were taken away, and they removed all the organs they could. They were then sent to work. But they couldn't, and a week later they died. Children also suffered horrific punishment during World War II. In Poland, within the city of Lodz, Kinderkäse was built, a camp for infants and adolescents from 2 to 16 years old. The boys were forced to labors such as making straw shoes and wicker baskets, while the girls were in charge of tasks related to laundry, tailoring and cooking. These activities were carried out in situations of extreme weakness and hunger. Their breakfasts consisted of a slice of bread and half a liter of coffee. Only at night did they receive a new food ration, which usually consisted of potato soup with beetroot or cabbage. In any case, if they received any punishment for various behaviors, they were prohibited from eating for several days, which led to their death. Józef Witkowski, author of the book Nazi Concentration Camp for Children in Lodz, described the behavior of Edward August, an SS guard at Kinderkäse, stating that he was constantly drunk. He was omnipresent. He took pleasure in subjecting prisoners to the most imaginative tortures. He beat and kicked them in the most sensitive places, buried them in sandboxes, immersed them in a barrel of water, hung them by the legs with a chain and submerged their heads in a tank with used car lubricants, cut off their genitals with a knife. He clicked their heels and stubbed out cigarettes on the prisoners' chests. To conclude, it is important to note that all the cases just mentioned are only some of the punishments received by the prisoners of the concentration camps created by Nazi Germany, but without a doubt, they portray the suffering and pain of those who had no choice but to tolerate them. This is how we reach the end of the video, and we want to ask you, what consequences do you think those who received such savage harassment may have suffered? Leave your opinion in the comments section, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for our next video.